Book Club. It is Sunday nights, not one of our regular nights, but sometimes you have to make an exception, and this is the man you make an exception for. So, Paul Finch.
Hiya, how are you, Sam?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about Rogue. Show us. Did you say you've got all 8 of the books with you to show?
I've got all the Heck books with me, yeah, at this moment as I speak.
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
if you just want to look at Rogue, here it is.
We are
the
back
8th in
to
the series.
front on the camera.
Well, it always will be, won't it? But is it always? I don't know.
No, if you go into that little cog that we were messing about with before we came online, there is a button that says mirror camera. It's a tick box. So if you untick that, then
mirror camera.
There you go.
Let's have a go at that.
So you should be on the right way around now.
Also, only a minor
there we go.
Then. There we go. Okay. That's the 8th in the series, as you're aware, and as other people might be aware. But it's obviously, there has been a slight gap between that one and the last one. There is a story to be told there. How much time have you got?
All the time in the world. I know that you filled in a little bit with DC Lucy Clayburn, but I'm not sure of the reason.
Right. Well, okay. Well, that's pretty straightforward. The Heck books, the original Heck book was Stalkers. That's the first one. It was with Avon at HarperCollins, and I think it was around 2013, and it's became a very quick bestseller, which was great. The Heck books are slightly different for those who aren't aware. They're not straightforward police procedurals. They're very, very gritty, very dark. There's a lot of action in them, and we don't really we don't dwell on procedure too much. So obviously they are invariably murder investigations or investigations of serious crime. I apologise. I'm going to get around to answering the question. I'm just giving the background would probably help a little bit.
It would definitely.
Yeah, one of the key things with the Heck books was I set them in the fictional National Crime Group. This predated the National Crime Agency, so I always say they pinched the idea from me.
Obviously.
It was a kind of British FBI scenario, but manned by police officers, not by sort of federal agents. And Heck was one of them. Well, this gave me the opportunity to send him to a different part of the country in every single book, which seemed to work very well. It also enabled me to do a slightly more action-led, because just setting it in one particular area, you're limited in terms of the kind of car chases you can do and the sort of high-octane action sequences running along the tops of trains and all this kind of crazy stuff, which we get in the Heck books. Now, the Lucy was I'd done about 3 Heck books when my editor at Avon said, do you fancy doing a parallel series about a police woman? Obviously, I mean, I pride myself on having quite a sort of diverse cast of characters in every book. I don't it's not just a man's world. I think it's probably say the female characters get a real crack at the whip in these books. They certainly are heavily involved in everything, and like Heck, there isn't a beating they don't take. So they're very involved, very key. Not just police women, but some of the other women in Heck's life. His sister, for example, an ex-girlfriend of this kind of thing, a current girlfriend, all this sort of thing. The Lucy book seemed like a great idea. I mean, this was not going to be a National Crime Group. This was going to be a Manchester-based fictional borough in Manchester, Crowley, and Lucy was going to be a kind of younger, relatively new detective dealing with much more procedural type investigations, but again, getting involved with serious crime, primarily because, and this was where I thought we had a real neat hook. Her dad, who she'd never known, she'd grown up the child of a single mum. It suddenly transpires is a major gangster in the crew, which is a sort of serious crime syndicate in the north of England. a few people said, well, there's no way she'd have got into the police, but the reality was her mum had concealed this fact from her, and she never knew who her dad was, and then she finds out in a sort of tough way. Frank cracking her dad then comes into the remainder of the Lucy books. Now, I'm quite happy to do more Lucy books, but the Lucy series and the Hex series came to an abrupt halt. I think it was around 2017 when I moved to Orion. You know what it's like. Publishers are not always overly keen to take on series that have been developed at another publisher.
Yeah.
Now, I sort of thought, well, it'll be all right. You know, I will find a way at some point to make it happen again. But we had moved a little bit away. I mean, these fashions and fads within crime publishing industry do change at the drop of a hat. We'd suddenly moved towards standalones being more popular than series and franchises. So I did a couple of standalones for Orion. Never Seen Again and One Eye Open, which again was set in the sort of world of hard-boiled crime. I like to use that term, hard-boiled crime. I much prefer the sort of urban thriller to the procedural-based murder investigation, and certainly I prefer it to the kind of cozy whodunit that is hugely popular, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love those, but I wanted to do, I preferred the kind of sort of roughneck coppering in the bad parts of town kind of thing that I was used to when I was a copper myself.
Yeah.
But then, of course, the move to Orion then also ran in like a steam train into COVID. And for a couple of years, we were all not really knowing what was going to happen next. You know, I mean, it was a tough time, of course. I mean, a lot of people had it tougher than me, I'm absolutely sure. But, I mean, I did catch COVID a couple of times, as we all did, but it didn't really seem to have much effect on me, thankfully. But we then had, but of course, in the publishing world and the writing world, everything was delayed enormously. And the next thing I knew, once we kind of emerged from that crisis, Heck and Lucy were quite a few years in the past. And I was looking, and I was looking for, and I had no one really who I spoke to was that keen to resurrect an older series. To fill the time, I'd written a couple of historical novels, sort of not crime, but just high adventure, medieval action novels. I then signed with Thomas and Mercer at Amazon to do a new series of standalone crime. But they're very gracious. But I did ask them, would they be interested in me revamping the Hex series? Now, there's a reason why I persistently kept trying to bring it back, and that was because I got so much fan mail. Now, that sounds like a conceited thing to say, but
no, not one bit.
Well, in the age of the internet, you know, it's very easy for people to contact you, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on X, and I'm here, there, and everywhere online. I have my own blog, which I reply to people who want to chat. And loads of people kept saying, "When are you going to bring Heck back? When are you going to bring Heck back?" I mean, that was my bestseller. I mean, sold a million books, which were mostly Heck books, overseas as well as here. It got quite a good following in sort of Germany and Italy and Poland and places like that. And this just wasn't enough to persuade my publishers to do anything. So I thought, well, I've got a window of opportunity between. I mean, I've already written the book for Amazon. I'm halfway through proofreading it. It'll be out next year. But I had an opportunity, because Amazon said it was fine with them, to bring out the Heck book myself that I had written during COVID, which was Rogue. It's a direct pickup from Kiss of Death, which was Kiss of Death was the last of the Heck books. It ended on an absolutely catastrophic note for some of the characters in it. So not only had I stopped writing the books in the eyes of the readership, I'd left them on a cliffhanger. So that was another reason why I wanted to at least keep the story alive. And yeah, I mean, as I say, my new publishers, Thomas and Mercer, have been absolutely fine with it. They don't mind, which is really good. I mean, I've already really good of them. I mean, Rogue was already written. I have a confession to make. I've also written another one already, Devil's Bargain, which is in this one, Lucy is in this one as well. So it's a Heck and a Lucy Claiborne story together. The idea being to keep it bubbling along in the background, so it was a complicated route to bringing it back. But I have to say, I'm chuffed to bits because it's doing really well and I'm getting loads of nice things said about it.
It's a fantastic book. Now, I've not finished it yet, but we don't do spoilers here anyway. So so it doesn't matter. We wouldn't be discussing the end anyway. But it's a fantastic book. And I said to you before we came online, I just need another hour. Just one more hour to finish it.
I'm obviously delighted that you like it. It's the reviews have been, I have to say, exclusively very good, very gushing. It's got everything that books have. It is, it's an action-led thriller, really, with a character who just seems to have won the hearts of a lot of readers. I think, one of the things that I thought was quite important with Heck, but is that, the danger with doing a sort of male-led thriller series is it becomes a kind of another Jack Reacher. It becomes a sort of an invincible tough guy. So we don't want that. I want him to
you've
be
not got that, have
normal.
You? That's not Heck at all.
Yeah, he's not an ex-para or an ex-SAS man or anything like that. He obviously is brave. He takes risks. He's got a lot of emotional baggage, and I think he's got good, interesting relationships with a range of different people. And he's an awkward character. He's not the sort of guy Errol Flynn would have played. I mean, he's got a rough edge to him for sure, and he's a rule breaker, and he's completely unimpressed by the higher echelons of the police, which I think probably most ex-cops would agree would say the same thing.
I was going to say it must be a lot of fun writing that because you've all sat there and thought it.
Yeah, he's an irreverent character. He's not disrespectful of the high ranks for the sake of it. It's just the ones he doesn't rate. He doesn't hold back. I think it works well. I mean, I had some quite interesting posts over the comments and quotes from people over the years. Like one of them, it wasn't for this book. I think it was the last Heck book. Was a former supervisor of mine who said something like, "I see that as a writer, Paul Finch plays as fast and loose with procedure as he did when he was a father." But also there was a really nice one. A lady got in touch with me who said, "I am a detective sergeant. I'm a detective sergeant in the Metropolitan Police in London. I only have one question. I only have two questions for you. Firstly, is Heck a real person? And secondly, can you introduce me to him?" So, well, at least I'm hitting the right kind of
You're hitting some kind of note there, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm more than happy with that. I think they are character-driven stories rather than mystery-driven stories. But yeah, it was important not to turn it into a kind of two-fisted hero who can knock six guys down with a single punch. I don't want any of that. That's the sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger type action thing, which we didn't want to do. And we keep the shooting to a minimum as well, because we are in Britain, not America. So, I don't think people would have bought it if there were massive gunfights. I mean, I know there are one or two, but primarily they're not the police who are doing the shooting,
We've got some hellos. So Kaz and Malcolm and Sharon and Donna have said hello. And Donna's saying she's agreeing it's brilliant. She's not finished either, but she's not far off either.
Oh, that's great. That's lovely. Thank you guys. It's really nice to hear that.
So you are really kind of enjoying getting back into this after waiting.
Yeah, I feel as if I've had a real burden taken off my shoulders, because I kept reassuring people that the series was going to continue, and I didn't know how I was going to do that. And when we were in the depths of COVID, it felt as if we were really a long way from doing that. But I kept reassuring people. I knew it was going to. I mean, as I said, the book was already written. I mean, I didn't waste my time during COVID. I wrote I wrote 3 books, I think, during the COVID crisis. The 2 of them, as I say, Rogue was one of them. But the next Heck book, I mean, Devil's Bargain is the name, but it's a working title that could change. that was the next one. And yeah, it feels like it's. I mean, it's a character. It was my first character. It's the one I've written most about. I mean, I do enjoy doing standalone thrillers. They are. I mean, in some ways, standalones are my preferred reading.
Mm.
You know, I think if you can tell a good story in one book, that's great. But with Heck, it's a character that I'm so familiar with. He almost writes himself, you know. And I have had a. I mean, I do like the fact that because we're sort of slightly outside the boundaries of the normal police procedural, we can really go OTT with the villains. I mean, I had a one review that said, yet again, Mark Heckenberg tangles with villains who'd be more at home in Batman than in the average police story. So they are the essence of evil, the villains usually.
I'm just trying to think how far in. There's a pub scene, but I don't know if it's early on enough or not for me to go into detail about it.
Well, I mean, it's not at the end. I don't think it'll matter.
No, it's nowhere near the end. It is quite early on. I'm always just wary of kind of putting my foot in something. But there's a scene, so there's a guy who, you know, technically doesn't own the pub, but owns the pub. And there's a scene where he kind of walks in and almost, you know, could almost get leathered at any second by all of these people who can, you know, can tell he's a cop a mile away.
It's an underworld. Yeah, it's an underworld pub. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just brilliant to read it. So go on, tell us about this scene, because it had me laughing, but also it grips you because you just don't know what's going to happen next in there.
Well, Heck is obviously, because of the circumstances surrounding. I mean, it's been pretty well publicised, not least on the back of the book, that he's under suspension at the moment for suspicion of involvement in a heinous crime, which of course he's not responsible for. And the truth is, not many of his former colleagues really think he is. But it's become a very big issue, and to pursue the real killers, he needs to call on the underworld to help him. And he kind of thinks he's going beyond the pale here, but I think he's got to the point where he thinks there's going to be no way back for him. But he's so determined to nail the killers of so many of his colleagues, because that's what it's about. And again, that's on the back of the book. I think.
Yeah.
There was a mass shooting in a pub when there was a police function, and 26 police officers were killed, and another countless number were seriously injured, including people who were very close to Heck. And so he's determined to nail these villains, and he needs to call on the underworld for help. Now, there are only so many people he can ask for help, because obviously a lot of the underworld despise him.
Yeah.
But there are one or two who he's had fair dealings with. And one of the characters, the character you're referring to, in fact, who I'm pretty sure the name is Leroy Butler.
Yeah.
I mean, so what he owes Heck because of something that happened in a Heck novella, which I put on my blog Christmas 2017, called "Brightly Shone the Moon That Night."
Making a note of that.
And you can read it for free. It's still up there. I mean, in fact, if you go on Twitter or on my on Facebook, there's a link. I put a link on there today. It's still up on my blog and in 3 parts, and you can read it for free. You don't have to pay anything. But something happened in that novella, which means that Leroy Butler is never going to not do Heck a favour if the situation arises, which he kind of does. So I do like to link the books together. I mean, I'm always a little bit concerned about that, because you can't guarantee that people have read everything. But the key is to try and explain it without just big expo dumps appearing in the middle of the text, you know.
Yeah.
So I think they have a little bit of a chat. I mean, the favour he does him it's not a really great favour, if I'm absolutely honest. But he basically gets out of the pub alive, which is a result on this occasion.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you like that scene. It was funny enough. When I was putting the marketing campaign together, I pulled in a bunch of amateur actor friends of ours, of mine and my wife's, and we dramatised some scenes do a sort of audible dramatisation to put them on trailers, and that was one of the scenes we chose because everyone seemed to think it was a good scene.
It's a cracking scene, but now I need to go and find this trailer as well. I'm going to have a list of things to do. I've got 3 parts of a story to read.
Yeah, well, the trailers were um, something we'd never done. Well, I'd never had done before. They're full of dramatized scenes from the book, but they're only like a minute and a half each. I did about 4 of them. They were primarily posted online in the build up to publication. So the kind of the wording would be out of date now because it would sort of say coming in October, you know. But I mean, they're all on my. If you go down my sort of, I don't know if they're on Twitter or not, but if you go down my Twitter feed, they're all on there eventually. My blog, which is you'll find by doing Paul Finch author blog, just searching that, and you roll back to Christmas 2017, I think it is. Brightly Shone the Moon That Night is on there. But as I say, I've posted a link to it online today. So you'll find out if you just look on Facebook or whatever, there's a link to it.
I'm literally making notes of this.
Right.
Malcolm has a question for you. How much do you rely on your police career when writing plot or character? Now, before you answer that, I will say that reading yours, you can tell that you've got a history with the job. It shines through. I think it's really obvious.
Well, I've been out a long time. I mean, I always sort of say to people, and thanks for the question, Malcolm. What I tend to find is I always say I don't write police textbooks. You know, I don't fill them with legalese and protocols. I mean, partly because my knowledge of that is a bit out of date, but also because, you know, we all cut the detail. I mean, we want to get to the action, don't we? So, I mean, if you were to literally create a real police officer's day, it'd be really boring, you know, because half it would be filling forms in, well, electronic forms as they are now. So I don't worry too much about that. But I am very, very. I know coppers. I know how they talk. I know how they interact. A lot of it comes over as being very irreverent because they are. It's a job that it's a very high stress job, and it creates some quite spiky characters. But you also have relationships that are not normal, the sort of normal relationships you get outside close partnerships. So, for example, you can fall out really badly with someone, and then a minute later, it's perfectly all right again.
Yeah,
there's no grudges held. You know, it's like you are with your spouse. You know, or your partner, you might have a row, and then 5 minutes later, you're just having a chat again. Things like that.
Yeah.
Different viewpoints on how the job should be done. There's the old school position, which of course is pretty much Heck. Gemma, who was his regular other half, very straight bat. So had a lot of fun with that. And I think that kind of snappy police dialogue, I mean, there's a dark sense of humour. We have to be careful these days because we don't want to stray too much into, I mean, you know, you don't want to offend people. So I have to put a lid on that to a certain extent. But real police humour is really dark.
Yeah.
I don't think that would necessarily be appreciated by non-police readers. So you have to be careful with that kind of thing. But I think that all that sort of the banter, the issues that come up all the time that cause problems during, you know, the silly things that I can't believe this is happening, that the general public might not realise. I've got all that ingrained into me. So I try to make it as real a cop situation as possible. I also like the fact that because Heck is primarily is obviously a police detective, he's not a uniformed officer. He has been a uniformed officer in the past. You've got a kind of level of experience and expertise that it's not the kind of thing that they would easily sack, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's at this day and age, a very experienced detective with an amazing arrest record could probably get away with quite a lot in terms of the way he spoke to people, spoke to his supervisors. So I play that to the absolute max because I knew senior detectives who were just outrageously rude to the bosses because they knew they could get away with it because they didn't want to lose them. You know, I mean, they don't get disciplined all the time. You know, they're always getting disciplined, but so's Heck. So, so it's a sort of I'm just replicating what I saw. So I don't know if that answers your question, Malcolm. I hope it does. I'm pretty much replicating what I experienced in the job myself.
I think it's to be expected, the dark humour, because if you're going to put humans, anyone, in a kind of a job where you go from a boring day to extreme situations. You see the worst in humanity. You see people during some of the worst times of their lives. You have got to expect that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to expect that level to go up, haven't you? You've got to expect the dark humour. You need a valve.
Well, you're not under fire every day. I mean, sometimes you're under fire, but you're not under fire every day. But one thing you are doing near enough every day is dealing with people who are having the worst day of their lives. You know, you very rarely would finish a shift feeling everything's wonderful and hunky-dory with the world.
Yeah.
You know, you would often think, thank God that's over. You know, and then the struggle then would be not to take it home with you. So, but I try to capture a lot of that. I try to capture the sort of stress, the stress of the job. I mean, I think in one of the books, I think it might be Sacrifice. I do apologise. I feel like a real self-promoter here. Sacrifice
is the interview is to discuss your books.
Sacrifice is the second Heck book. God, I can't get used to where the camera is since we've swatched it around.
Yeah, you have to kind of go up and then to the side.
Up and to the side. Up and to the
there
side.
There you go.
Yeah. And there's a great big police. I think there's a retirement party that gets really out of hand in that one. In a pub where they get sort of really, really rat-legged and dancing on the bar and all this kind of thing. So, I mean, I certainly went to a few of those. So, yeah, I kind of bring all that stuff in, you know, make it humanize the characters and humanize the scenarios. But I don't, as I say, I try to avoid the minutiae of investigations. I mean, I certainly didn't do that with, actually, ironically, with Sacrifice. That's probably the most procedural base, because that's a sort of basically is a single murder case and they're all working on it together. A lot of the books, Heck kind of goes off on at a tangent, you know, following a lead and ends up being isolated from the rest of the team. So, but you just throw everything in that you remember to try and make it feel as authentic as possible. Then you have to cut half it out because you don't want a 170,000 word book at the end.
Like a series, but in one book. One length.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do try to avoid. Some of the cop shows I've loved. I mean, I did write for The Bill, of course, as you probably remember. But
I do.
Some of the cop shows I loved. I mean, my favourite cop show of all, I think, was The Shield. I don't know if you remember The Shield in the early 2000s.
Never watched it.
Oh well, I mean, it is worth watching. I mean, it's slightly outdated now, but they would tell the most amazing stories in 40 minutes. You know, I mean, it was fabulous stuff. But of course, they were very skilled. It was a very skillfully made show in that threads ran through endless threads just ran through every episode, and so each episode, even though it was probably not 40 minutes, probably about 50. There'd be 3 or 4 serious crimes being investigated all at the same time. You know, the energy, it was so energized. It was 100 miles an hour, you know. I think I certainly took some inspiration from that to try and hit, you know, kind of bang, 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 bang sort of story. I'm not quite sure we got onto that. How did you get onto the Shield?
We were talking about how it has to be realistic that you have dark humour in the police because you know it's extreme situations that you're in. So
well, you have people. When I was in, it was much less acceptable for police officers to break down in public. You know, no one ever would have a freak out in public, even if they went to the most appalling crime scenes. I mean, I went to a couple of murder scenes that I still dream about now, and you just have to literally do that. And I think it's probably more or less the same now. You have to do the stiff upper lip thing, because if you guys can't handle it, who's going to do it? Who's going to deal with it? You know, if someone's has lost a loved one in even something as like a fatal accident, you're the ones who are going to have to go and tell the mum and dad, or the wife, or the husband. No one else is going to do it.
Yeah.
So you can't go in a state. You've got to be professional about it. You know, that puts an enormous amount of stress on people as well. I think in Sacrifice, there's a scene where a prostitute suffers a horrendous death, and Heck has to deliver the death message. And when he gets to the house, the 2 little children are there with their sort of grandma, and they're in like Mickey Mouse pajamas, and he has to go in and tell them. And because the DI who was charged with doing it said, "I'm not doing it. You can do it. I'm not doing it." And that was taken more or less directly from memory. That, I mean, I can put your readers at ease. The chapter ends when he goes in. We don't go through the appalling angst and anguish that happens, So again, I suppose that's the kind of world it is. And so if you have dark humor, if you have what we used to call choir practices, they which were the sort of wild parties, there's a reason why those happen.
Got to let it all out somewhere. Yeah, of course.
It's a stress valve, basically.
Yeah. Malcolm did say you did answer his question. Thank you.
All right, great.
He also said he's never known me make so many notes. But I know, Malcolm, if Paul's recommending things, I need to go and look at them. We like a lot of the same stuff.
Thus far, I'm recommending my own stuff, so there's a bit of self-interest in this,
Well, you've said about The Shield and things as well.
The Shield, was a great series, I mean, I think it's worth watching even now, sort of 20 years down the line. I would recommend it. It breaks a few... It breaks a few boundaries and a few taboos, actually. It would be uncomfortable viewing in our slightly more, I suppose, politically correct era. I mean, it handles sort of discomforting issues quite frankly. It's quite in your face, some of it. Still a good watch. It's not by any means for children, though, so don't have a little one on your knee when you're watching it. I'll tell you now, don't.
I'm just wondering, did anybody else who's watching just kind of, when you'd said it was 2002, and then you said, about 20 years ago, did anybody else's jaw hit the floor? That was 20 years ago. Oh, my word.
Well, I mean, I don't even like to think about it.
No, me neither. Let's move on. Writing for TV, which obviously you've written for the Bill, you've done other things, writing scripts and things, but I really want to just focus on TV writing versus writing books. Why can authors writing books not get away with the same kind of things that you can with TV? Having worked in both, what's your view on that?
When you say not get away with the same kind of things,
so you're talking kind of, I've been watching an American program on Netflix called SWAT. So there was a film years ago, and now there's this series, and you just know it's nothing like that, but it's so entertaining. I really don't care how accurate it is. I know I should, and I do in my day job, but watching things, I'm not bothered. Why can authors not get away with it?
I don't know. I don't know whether we... I mean, the only thing I would say is that, so if we tie this into the previous conversation, the one thing that, I mean, TV's been getting away with inaccurate stuff, TV drama, for a very, very long time. I mean, people think they know what crime scene procedure is because they see it on telly. Well, it's all wrong. I mean, they cut because they don't want to bore people. So if you're looking at, without drifting back into what we were saying before, they cut a lot of corners because drama is about entertainment, and again, they've usually got 50 minutes to tell the story. So they're going to cut out a lot of extraneous characters and a lot of extraneous detail and just stick with the meat. With a book, I'm not sure. I mean, I cut a lot of corners with my books. I mean, I'm not. I mean, maybe books are more because we get, every person can put a review online now if they want to, and it may be that you may well be that you get so many reviews for a book that people just stop reading. But people can. I mean, I do see some authors sometimes complain about some what they consider to be really unfair reviews. Without getting onto that subject, maybe it's just that you're more accessible, so you have to be more careful. I mean, obviously the publishers are more. I have to say, when I was writing for the Bill, they were very, very sharp on procedure. I mean, while they were, one thing was funny though was they often, you had police advisors who were permanently employed by the show, so and they would look at every script and they would say this wouldn't happen, this wouldn't happen, this wouldn't happen. And 99% of the time, you'd have to make the changes because it was the Bill considered it very good to keep the Metropolitan Police on side because they were filming a lot in built-up areas where there was traffic to be diverted and this kind of thing. And some areas where they need a police bodyguard, so they always wanted to keep the Met on side. So any stories that were about, for example, police corruption, the Met considered it very important that the corrupt coppers got their just desserts. I mean, I have a lot of corrupt coppers in my books. They don't always get the just desserts, but I think that's a more realistic picture of it. But they were very. But I said it was 99% of the time. The 1% can be an occasion like when I was at a script meeting, and what a storyline was being discussed that was they were going to go ahead with it, where there was a sort of firearms dealer in Sun Hill looking to arm the underworld, and that was being worked on by a special unit of uniformed officers, not a firearms unit. And I said, there's no way regular uniforms would be dealing with a case like this. And they said, yeah, but it's a really good story. So they were really hot on procedure until it got in the way of the story. You know what I mean? So I think there were some things though, but mostly you couldn't get away with in TV. I mean, I have to say my experience of writing novels has been more pleasurable than writing film or TV, simply because
that's interesting.
I've had freer reign. I mean, writing films, for example, it's just a nightmare, because you go through. There's so many different people who you want to put their mark on it. Initially it's just you and the producer, and then you end up with a script editor, and then you end up, if you're lucky, with a director, and then you end up with a sales agent, and then you end up with a financier, and it goes on and on. Every one of them wants to have that, and they just make changes for no reason. I've never really experienced that in the book world. I've only worked for with an editor, and then the copy editor will come on later on, and a proofreader, but you can either accept or disregard their position. Speaking for myself, I try to be as compliant as possible. It's not just a one man or one woman job, writing a book. You do, and you're working with people who are significantly experienced and deserve to be in the position they're in. So you kind of, if you don't take heed of what they say, you're silly, in my view. So my ultimate experience is that I think writing books is less frustrating in that what you can and can't include. I mean, I have to say, times are changing. It's a well-known discussion that we're in the midst of these culture wars, and it is affecting. Everyone has to be sort of careful of what they do and don't include in their books. But I've always tried to be, not because I'm particularly right, but or had a or was prophetic in my thinking. I've always tried to be as sort of diverse in my books as I could be anyway. So I think that because that's the society you deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Again, I'm not sure if I answered the question really.
Yeah, you're good. I wanted to touch back on something you said before that made me wonder. I often will see things that say that part of the training for the police is a background check. So if you've got kind of, relatives who are, if you're the daughter of a mafia boss, I can see that being an issue for you getting into the police. But just where is the line? Is there a line? Because really, the person applying to be in the police could be completely innocent and not involved. Where is the line?
The truth is, I don't really know. I mean, I these days it's likely to be a lot different. I mean, bear in mind when I was in, there were height restrictions. I mean, men could. I think you had to be at least 5'10".
I was going to say, if you're adding something to the 5 foot, I've got no chance back in the day.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's the case anymore. But there were also, eye tests and hearing tests, and you had to show a certain amount of physical proficiency before they even sent you to training school, which were like military training camps then. So there was and they did do a background check. I mean, I remember I was living at home with my mum and dad, and they turned up unexpectedly one Friday evening, and they stayed for nearly 2 hours. Now, I know a friend who didn't get into the police around the same time I did, because when they came to his house, the inspector who came to visit him looked around. I mean, I have to be honest, his flat was a bit of a dump. I don't know whether that worked against him, but they made a comment about the fact he had Marxist posters on his wall. Now, he was a sort of typical student. He had all kinds of posters on the wall, anti-war posters and all this, none of which he believed in, but they made him look cool in the eyes of other students.
The fashionable thing.
He was convinced that was the reason he didn't get in. They don't have to give a reason why they don't accept you. Whether it's as strict as that these days, I don't know. I genuinely don't. I mean, it was a lot. When I was a young constable, I was the only person near enough on my relief who wasn't ex-military. So there were a lot of ex-army and navy personnel in the police when I was in, and that applied to the policewomen as well. Not all of them, but a lot of them were. So the background checks with regard to, do you have villainous relatives? I would think there might be that might be a problem for you. I mean, in the Lucy Claiborne books, her mum had concealed from her the fact that her mum had started. If you remember, I don't know if you remember, but Lucy's mum was a sort of respectable working class woman in Crowley, Manchester, and Lucy had always just grown up with her mum, and her dad supposedly had left them before she was born. In actual fact, her mum was a stripper in a nightclub when she was young, and her real dad was one of the bouncers. Now, obviously, her mum concealed this background to her when she sort of changed her life around. But her dad continued to be involved in the underworld and had gradually risen to a position of prominence in the underworld. So Lucy got into the police without anyone knowing what her family background was. I mean, would she have got in if they'd known her dad was a gangster? No, I don't think she would have done.
Probably not. And these days, we're looking at the internet and homes, so the police sharing information more easily across different departments, boroughs, counties, all of it.
Yeah.
So it must be far harder to kind of get anything past anybody now.
I think it is, but I also think they're probably a bit looser now in terms of who they want in. I mean, they made an effort to be as inclusive as possible. I don't think that extends to career criminals somehow. I mean, police officers have been whizzed for being involved in crime. It's that's not new. That's something that's goes on right back to Victorian times. Sometimes they do successfully conceal their character and their background. But and the other thing is, of course, that and I've touched on this in quite a few of my books, particularly the Lucy Claiborne books. Police officers get corrupted once they're in the job, because it's still not the best paid job in the world, given the risks you run. And if a senior underworld figure offers you an awful lot of money just to look the other way, certain people would find that very difficult to resist. And it does happen, so they might go in as non-offenders and they come out as offenders. And of course, then there are the lunatics who are attacked, like the copper who got whizzed for murdering, was it Sarah Everard? I found that incredible.
Yeah.
That somehow a person like that had got in. But a lot of psychopaths are very good at hiding who they are, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we won't get into the whole thing, but I think it's one of those things, the same way it will be when you're writing in real life. There are going to be people who know things and don't come forward with them. And it makes very interesting reading for a book, but it's not what you want in the real world, is it? So.
Oh, God, no. No, not at all. I mean, there's still a huge difference between the fictional crime thriller world and the real world. I mean, I love writing about it, but doing it, there are times when you would be thoroughly depressed. I mean, I always say to, if anyone asks me, when did you decide you wanted to leave? Or you wanted to do something else? I mean, not many people know, but my dad was a writer. He passed away a long time ago now. And I remember going as a kid to Granada television with him when he was handing scripts in and chatting to producers. And it was a magical world to me. It was surreal to see famous people wandering the corridors and people say, "Hello, Brian." And I was fascinated by what he did. And then as I got older, I sort of I moved away from that and I wanted to be a copper. But I remember many years later, I went to an incident in a block of flats in Salford, which I won't describe because it was indescribable. And afterwards, when everybody else was there, I went upstairs onto the roof to get some fresh air. And I remember looking across the sort of bleak, rain-soaked streets of Manchester, the middle of the night, over the rooftops and the chimneys. And I saw the Granada television light shining. you know, do you remember how it used to shine over the city back then?
Yeah.
When it was still there, of course, it's not there anymore now, sadly.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I remembered everything as that I'd liked and wanted to do as a child, and I thought, I want to be a writer. I want to ditch this, and I want to be a writer. And the bill had started a couple of years earlier, so that was where I thought, I'm going to target the bill first because I know what I'm talking about, and I can write cop stuff and I've got some great stories. So that was the moment I decided that I was going to leave, but I was only going to leave if I could find a way into that world, because it wasn't that easy. I ended up going into journalism because I didn't have a clue about professional writing at that stage. I'd only ever written reports, but that was a signal moment, that, and it was the Granada. Even though I ended up not writing for Granada, as it was the bill was down south in the bill was down in London, but it was the same thing. You know, it was the same, and the rest is history, really. But yeah, it was that sign, the Granada TV sign, that's the moment I decided I was going to try and become a writer.
Can you remember what the first episode you wrote for the bill was?
Well, I only wrote 3, as it turned out.
Why
then I
do
moved
I
on to other
think you
things.
wrote more than that?
No. Well, I wrote a lot that didn't get on.
Okay.
The first one was one called Protect and Survive, which introduced the character of Mickey Webb. And it was based on a real incident where a very dangerous criminal had escaped from a high security prison and had come back to Sun Hill to get even with everyone who he considered had sort of stitched him up. So it was a sort of thriller, really, rather than a procedural episode, because one after another they got done by him, and they finally caught him and had a scrap with him on one of the sort of rough housing estates where his brother had been in a squat. His brother was a drug addict. So that went down very well, and I moved away from the bill for various reasons. But you know, sometimes you don't get on with people, and no point just carrying on with it, is there? But I moved on to Doctor Who after that, the Audible for Doctor Who. But it was around that time, the mid 2000s, that my agent persuaded me to write crime novels, because he said the stuff I did for the bill was great, and it was very well received, and I obviously knew my stuff, so why don't we do that? So yeah, so I moved into Heck was born, basically.
And I know we've discussed this, but it does give you a unique point of view. You know, you've seen lots of different changes in the police, and you've seen different changes in TV. You've seen different changes in the way that books are not written, maybe, but promoted, and you know, all the different trends that have come and gone.
The trends is something that we all struggle to keep track of, aren't they? I mean, I would never have thought that, you know, the kind of Village Green cozy mysteries would come back the way they have done. You know, I mean, they've never really gone away, but they seem to be a huge thing at the moment. I mean, I was told this was one of the reasons I was a bit frustrated, because this is one of the reasons I brought Heck back myself, because a couple of people said to me, you know, it won't sell. It's too tough. It's too in your face. People want feel good stories these days. They want classy country houses and and village green stories and things like that. And I thought, well, yeah, that's great. I mean, but this is not that. And I'm still going to try and push it, because I don't totally buy that. I mean, look at the two of the best TV shows on telly at the moment is The Day of the Jackal and Slow Horses, which are hard-boiled crime thrillers at heart. You know, set in urban settings. So I don't totally buy that, I have to say. But like you say, it comes in waves. I don't know what the readers think of that, by the way. These are the opinions of the publishers, of course, and the agents. I don't know what the readers think about it.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I have spoken to lots of different people over the years at different events, all different stages of the career, all different jobs in publishing, and they all say we want something new, but we don't really. We want the same thing, because they want tried and tested, because it's, you know, it's the money of the system. You know, everybody wants to get paid, but it's tricky.
Well, the proof of that is the books all look the same, don't they? You know, your crime thrillers do have a very, very, very generic cover. Most of them do, and I understand why they do that. I mean, the title. I mean, I understand why they do that, because people want to know. People want to find straight away what they're interested in.
Yeah.
So you see a row of books on the top shelf in Tesco or whatever, and you're looking for the ones that have all got a small figure set against a towering cityscape.
We want a silhouette. We want a woman in
Yeah.
a red coat.
Yeah, then they'll know that that's what they're looking for. And the only thing that peeves me a little bit is that they do that with titles as well. I think it's all about searchability with online search engines. I mean, all my titles have been changed. I mean, none of my books have got the original title they had. And I'd take advice on that though, because I don't know anything about marketing. It's that's what they're good at. So if they want to change it, they change it. I've long ago stopped being precious about that kind of thing.
I think sometimes you just need to let the people who do their thing, and
yeah.
I'm also a sucker for a cottage or a cabin with a light on.
All right, yeah. Well, those are or a kind of a mist shrouded mansion towering over a lake. I mean, this is all about trends. But as I say, writing a book is not a one man or a one woman occupation.
No,
There's a lot of
not,
people involved. Yeah.
We've got 2 minutes until 8:00. Do you want to show us the covers to the Hex series, and so everyone knows where to start? Because I've missed some of them, and I don't think it spoiled it for me at all.
All right. Okay. Well, in that case,
so I've got to go back.
And you've got to get the right position. That's Stalkers.
There we go.
That's the first one.
We'll have you working on a game show before you know it.
Yeah. Sacrifice is the second one. The third one is probably at the bottom of the pile. They usually are, aren't they? Here we are. The third one is The Killing Club.
Ooh.
The fourth one is Dead Man Walking. As I say, I don't pick the titles. That originally was called Witch Cradle, which I still think was a better title. But as I say, I'm not going to tell.
I like both. I'd go for either.
Yeah. Hunted is the fifth one.
I've got to say, if I see a book with a title with something to do with hunted, I am picking that up.
Well, that's I think you'd like that one if you've not read it. The sixth one, Ashes to Ashes. That was a bit experimental, that cover, I think. I have to be honest, I wasn't keen on it. I mean, I thought it was all right at first, but then I started to think maybe it's a little bit different from
Stop overthinking.
Yeah. The seventh one of my favourites, Kiss of Death.
Oh, that's a gorgeous
that definitely was. Oh, that's a great one, yeah. And that really was. Again, it wasn't my title. I can't remember what the original title was, but it doesn't matter. That did very well, and I was really happy with that book. And that brings us up to date with the new one, number 8, Rogue.
Which is an absolutely cracking book.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so. It's a follow-on to Kiss of Death, but it can be read without having read Kiss of Death. But I think Kiss of Death is pretty much sets the scene for it. I'm just really glad it's out, because I consider the first phase of the Hex story told now. And if we do bring Lucy into the next book, it's not inconceivable they could pair them up again and again and again, depending on how well it goes down. Again, it's all about what people want, isn't it?
But it's also about what you want to write, because if you're not enjoying writing it, it'll show. You clearly love what you're writing.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm writing something very different for Thomas and Mercer. I mean, as I say, they've been great about this. Really good, really cooperative and helpful. I'm writing a standalone crime thriller for them. It's a world away from this. Well, not a world away. It's a bit different, but I'm enjoying that as well. So it's kind of good to have a couple of strings to your bow. But as I say, the Heck books are the ones that always feel like as I say, it feels like they write themselves, And I can't complain about that, can you? You sit there and let the book write itself.
I think anyone would like a book that just writes itself, that just pours out of you.
Yeah, we all would. We'd kill for it. It's like the goose that lays a golden egg, isn't it?
Thank you so much. I hope you come back for the release of the standalone.
Oh yes, yeah, I'd love to. It's due out in. No, I think it's next August, but there is some conversation about bringing it a bit sooner than that. Kind of hope they do, really. But as I say, if it is August, there may well be another Heck book before then. I can't say for sure about that yet. So, but that we'd be looking around March probably if that was the case. But I'll come on anytime you want. I can talk the hind legs of a donkey, me.
Well, thank you to everyone who's watched. We've had some lovely comments from people saying what a fab interview it was and how interesting you are. And Andy,
thanks very much, guys.
Andy Hill saying hello as well. Hi, Andy.
Thank you. Another ex-cop. Yeah. Thanks very much for having me.
And I hope I bump into you at an event before long. We're at the right side of the country to actually bump into each other, but we never do.
No, we did a couple of times at the one in Wigan, if you remember. But that said, we're coming to the time of year they're a bit thin on the ground now, aren't they? So but I'm sure we'll run into each other in the spring.
I'm sure we will. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'm going to go and sit in my office and read the last however many pages. I reckon I've got about an hour left, so that's the rest of my evening.
Great. Let me know what you think when you finally
get Absolutely to the end. Will do. And thank you everyone who's watched and asked questions. Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Thanks everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye then.
I think we are off.